In this video, we'll be working on this IELTS Writing Task 1 academic question. The graph shows how frequently or how often people ate at fast food restaurants. This is a grouped or clustered bar graph. In a simple or basic bar graph, there is one bar in each category. We have 3 bars in each category. So it means we have more data to work with. You'll need this question as we go along. You can take a screenshot of it, or if you have access to the Cambridge IELTS Academic Book 12, you'll find it there. First, let's discuss some vocabulary. The question has percentages, so some of these words and phrases can work. For large percentages, we can use phrases like significant proportion or substantial percentage. For small percentages, we can use phrases like a minor proportion or a small fraction. Also, we have words and phrases for specific percentages. For example, for 25%, we can say a quarter. For 75%, 3/4, and so on. We have all these different categories mentioned in the graph that we are given. And here are some synonyms we can use for each one of them. Whatever categories are given to you in the graph, you need to be careful that you change them only if you are confident that it will not change the meaning. For example, if I change every day to regularly, it doesn't mean exactly the same thing, so I should not do that. Here are some adverbs which do convey these frequencies, and we can use some of them in our writing. And these are synonyms of some other words and phrases from the question, which we can use to vary the vocabulary in our writing. Let's understand the data and plan what to write. First, we'll assign numbers to the 6 categories. This will reduce confusion, making it easier to plan. We cannot use these numbers in writing, but they help in planning. Keep in mind that we don't need to go into too many details. We are looking for comparisons, which categories are similar and which are different. We are looking for trends, that is, which things are increasing, which are decreasing, which are the highest in all years, etc. So we are looking for main or noteworthy features. To understand a graph, chart, or table, especially one with a lot of data, such as this one, I use a step-by-step system. First, I identify the highest and lowest. In this case, for each category, we have 3 years. So, we'll identify the highest and lowest for each year. Then we check for any values which are very close to the highest and lowest. After that, we group the remaining data. This could be in one single group or more than one group. Based on all of this, we look for trends. What is increasing, decreasing, fluctuating, or remaining steady? Next, we examine how much the values have increased or decreased and see if anything stands out. Finally, we figure out the overall based on this analysis. Let's start applying this system to the graph we are working on. The third category is the highest in the first 2 years, and the fourth category is the highest in the third year, that is in 2013. In all the 3 years, the lowest category is the first category. Next, we look for any percentages which are close to the highest figures or close to the lowest figures. These are our highest figures and these are our lowest figures. These 3 are close to the highest, these are close to the lowest. That is what we have mentioned here in our planning. With this, we are done with the highest, lowest, and values close to highest and lowest. Next, we try to group the remaining data. The only two categories we are left with now are the second and the fourth category. If we try to look at the range of values in this category, we see that it is between 13 and 20. If we observe closely, we see that most of them are very close to 15. The only outliers among these, or the only ones which are different from others, is this 13% and this 20%, which we have mentioned in our planning. After that, we look for trends. That is, what is increasing, what is decreasing, etc. If we look for overall increase or decrease, that is between 2003 and 2013, we realize that only fourth and fifth categories have increased, everything else has decreased. This has decreased, this increased, but finally it decreased, and so on. So, fourth and fifth categories are the only ones which have increased overall. We can mention this as a noteworthy feature in our writing. Now we try to look for the details of increase and decrease. So when we look for details, we see a similarity in trend of certain categories. First and sixth category, first decrease, and then there is almost no change. The same we see here as well. Fifth category increases, and again there is no change. So there is no change between 2006 and 2013 in three categories. Second and third category have a similar trend of increasing and then decreasing, increasing and then decreasing. The fourth category is the only one which first decreases and then increases. And we can also see that compared to all others, the amount of increase is much higher. With this, we have understood and analyzed the whole graph. Now we can figure out the overall or overview of the graph. The overall statement focuses on what is highest, what is lowest, what are the similarities in trends. So what we see overall is that there are two categories which are highest or close to highest, and we can see that the percentages are between 25 and 33%. That is what we have mentioned here. Then there are two categories which are the lowest with percentages between 3 and 5%. And we can also mention in the overall statement that only two categories increase after 10 years. This is the format we'll follow for our writing response. First, we'll paraphrase the question. That is, we'll write the question in different words without changing its meaning. After that, we write the overall statement. The basic content of the overall statement we have already discussed. After that, we start writing the body paragraphs, which will have details, comparisons, and noteworthy features. First, we paraphrase the question. There are many different ways to paraphrase the question. So I'll show you a few different ways and you can take your pick with whichever approach you are most comfortable with. One way to paraphrase the question is to use synonyms. Instead of shows, I've written illustrates. How frequently has been changed to how often. People to residents. USA to United States. Ate to visited. Fast food restaurants to fast food establishments. Between this and this year to over the period from this and this year. Another approach of paraphrasing is to use different forms of the words in the question. Sometimes the title of the graph can help with this as well. In this case, The title provides a different form of the word frequently, that is frequency, which can be useful in paraphrasing. So I've used the word frequency in my paraphrasing. I've also used the word decade in this paraphrasing because the period mentioned in the question is 10 years. Here is another paraphrasing of the question where I've used the phrase providing data. After paraphrasing, we work on the overall statement. This statement needs to tell what is happening in the graph as a whole. You don't need to include any detailed numbers or comparisons in this part. This becomes especially tricky when we have a lot of data like we have in the graph we are working on. So we refer back to our planning. Throughout, one common thing is that two categories are very high compared to all others, and two categories are very low compared to all others. So we mention it. Also, only two categories stand out, which increase overall after 10 years. This can be mentioned as well. Here is an overall statement. Overall, in all the 3 years surveyed, for the largest percentage, 25 to 33% of the population, fast food consumption at a restaurant was a moderate to occasional affair ranging from weekly to monthly or bi-monthly. In contrast, a much lower proportion, 3 to 5%, visited such outlets more frequently or less frequently. Between 2003 and 2013, only two categories saw an increase, once or twice a month and a few times a year. This shows a shift towards a lifestyle with fewer visits to fast food restaurants. This overall statement is slightly longer than usual. One, because the categories are long, once a week, once or twice a month, etc. And also because we needed to say three different things. Typically, we do not include any figures in the overall statement. We could remove these from here, but I've chosen to include them because if I do not include the figures here, I would need to repeat at least some of this in my body paragraphs. So I'm putting the figures and names of the categories in brackets or using a dash so that I don't have to repeat the whole thing again in the body paragraphs because it is important to give some figures in our writing response. So this is the final overall statement we have, which mentions the highest and lowest values and a notable trend. Now we start with the body paragraphs. So we refer back to our planning. We have already written about the two highest and the two lowest categories. So now we start with the two remaining categories, the mid-range categories. During the period surveyed, the proportion of US inhabitants with a fast food eating out routine of several visits a week and a few visits per annum was relatively consistent, ranging between 13 and 20%. So this is what we had analyzed when we were planning. And we had seen that the most common percentage was around 15. So we mentioned that. The most common figure hovered around 15%. After that, we mentioned the two that are different. That is, they are data points which are significantly different from others. The two outliers were several times a week in 2003, which peaked at 20%, and a few times a year in 2006, which dipped to 13%. Next, we write about the trends in our body paragraphs. First, we write about the first and the sixth category, that is every day and never. Between 2003 and 2006, both the everyday and never categories saw a decline, but their figures stabilized from 2006 to 2013. So we have used the word stabilized for no change. Next, we talk about the fifth category. Similarly, visits a few times a year initially increased and then leveled off. Stabilized and leveled off have similar meanings. Next, we mention the second and the third category, that is several times a week and once a week. Meanwhile, the percentage of individuals who frequented fast food outlets several times a week or once a week rose between 2003 and 2006 and subsequently dropped after 2006. We are now left with mention of this category. That is the fourth category, once or twice a month. The category that exhibited the most notable fluctuations was once or twice a month. It began at 30% in 2003, dropped moderately to 25% by 2006, and then surged, that is, increased significantly to nearly 33% by 2013, marking the largest shift in consumption patterns. So, just to review what we did, we understood the question, we used a system to understand the data, that is highest, lowest, close to highest, close to lowest, then trying to group the rest of the data and understanding the trends, that is increase, decrease, fluctuations and no change. Based on this, we figured out the overall. Once we had done that, we used this format of first paraphrasing the question, then writing an overall statement, and after that writing the body paragraphs to complete our writing response. With this, we are done with this sample writing. Hope this helped you. Do like and share this video. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more IELTS related content. Leave a comment if there is anything in particular you want us to make a video on. Bye for now. All the very best.